Welcome into Hold My Banner. That's right, Casey Hudson back alongside Ante Campbell. At this point, I think he has accepted that I have fully kidnapped him and Hold My Banner. But it's been a good time, Ante, and it always gives us an opportunity to catch up on all things Celtics. More importantly, we are getting so close to the NBA draft. So how do we make it make sense for the Celtics? How do we see how other trades could have potentially impacted how the Celtics maneuver through all of this? But the bottom line is, let's get back to a winning roster. And I only say that because of the injuries that have impacted all of this. Ante, what's up?
Oh, man, Casey, I'm glad to be back on the episode with you. I know you're not, as excited. I got to hear some of your NBA Finals takes. I got to hear some of these Celtics rumors.
So am I the one that's not excited, or are you not excited? Because I come on here singing Halliburton.
Hey, and we'll talk all about him. I'm excited to talk about that kid. But I do want to start off by talking about what the Celtics are going to do this offseason. And there's been a name being floated out because the Washington Wizards are looking to move Marcus Smart per HP Basketball, and Celtics fans got to thinking. They said, hey, Celtics unite. They said, Celtics fans, would you welcome a Marcus Smart return? Casey Hudson, how do you feel? Do you think Marcus Smart should come back and wear green again?
It's weird. I feel like we manifested this, right? Because it was either like the top of last week or the week beforehand. We were like looking at a list of some guys, and then we said, ooh, could we potentially see a return?
Yeah.
And I felt like I was like team no on that. So I don't want to be a hypocrite. I don't want to contradict myself. Look, we even talked about the fact that there's kind of been a contrast to how fans would be receptive of this and what fan emotions were when he did depart from the Celtics. Some fans were sad about it, obviously. Others were kind of like, I could see how this makes sense. Now, why I kind of want to stick with my no on this is where it makes sense to kind of get over your grief of the trade was the fact that defensive prowess, fantastic. He helped level things up defensively. We know the defensive DNA of this Celtics team. But with Jason Tatum not in the mix, with question marks on other big assets that could potentially get traded, I don't want to have a question mark around how much scoring and offensive help is going to come into the mix. Like, I don't want to have any question marks when it comes to offense, and that's not to go against him and like the potential of when he can pick things up, but I need the offense to be like stout, hot. I need to have zero question marks about it. So that's why I'm going to continue to kind of lean towards no.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. First of all,
you laughed at me, so there's got to be a thing.
First of all, my apologies before we start off this episode. It is 617 Day, and we got to celebrate the fact that the Celtics won 2 championships on June 17th in their prior history, one in 2024 and one in 2008 as well.
My apologies, Boston.
So, shout out to Boston, 617, you know what I'm saying? But bringing back Marcus Smart, does that help Boston potentially win another championship on 617 in the future? I'm not sure about that. Right. And it's a lot about the same things that you were talking about. Is the scoring going to be there? Now, what I will say is with a JB coming back, we are hearing he's going to be ready for the beginning of the season. He's going to be a little shaky and rusty probably at the beginning of the season.
Right.
No Jason Tatum. Derrick White should be ready to go, and whoever else is on the team, we'll see who that is. If we do add a Marcus Smart back into that type of roster, he will have opportunities to kind of figure it out early on as the Celtics are figuring out who their identity is without their star, Jason Tatum, right? Mm-hmm. So he will be able to test it out and see if he can get back to the scoring prowess that he had when he was here in a Boston Celtics jersey. Now, you said it. It's been ugly. The years in Memphis were ugly. He wasn't healthy. He didn't play a lot of games, but when he was playing games, he wasn't scoring much. He had a lot of donuts, a lot like a guy we'll talk about in a little bit later in the finals. You know what I'm saying? Like I told you, I'm excited to talk about that. But he did have some games, that were very ugly in the Memphis jersey. Then he got shipped off to the Wizards, and we don't really need to talk about that.
I mean,
that's
an average of 9
Wizards
points. I'll just throw it in the mix.
Right.
9 points.
Right.
Okay.
So it hasn't been pretty. So if I'm you, I'm agreeing with you. If I'm the GM of the Boston Celtics, which I'm not, luckily, I would not be calling the phone and calling the Washington Wizards and saying, "Hey, can we get something done here?" But I do want to play devil's advocate. If I were to have to take Marcus Smart back in a deal, I started shopping around and thinking, all right, what would I give up and what would I take back from the Wizards to make that deal done.
How do we make this make sense or make it attractive? That's the problem. Make it attractive.
Of course.
Present your case.
I think if we're all knowing that we have to get on the second apron, Drew Holiday's name is a name that I would like to throw out there, right? Okay. Give up a point guard, get one back, right, with Marcus Smart. And you say, Marcus Smart's not nearly as good as Drew Holiday. And you'd be right. So I would love to take on one of those young guys that sit over there in Washington. Can I get in on a Bilal Coulibaly? Can I get in on the kid from Pitt, Bub Carrington? Can I get in? You know what I'm saying? On Keyshawn George. Can I get in on one of those three guys? If I can get in on one of those young assets that they have at guard who defend and make shots and do a lot of the same things that the Celtics have identity is right now with Joe Mazzulla being their head coach. With Tatum out next year, hopefully, you know what I mean, for the whole entire year, because like I said, I would like him to not have to come into a pressure, high leverage situation.
Right.
That could be something I'm interested in, just possibly.
Right. So, okay, I'm glad that we got to this because it's more so us getting more pieces along with Marcus Smart versus like us potentially giving up too much. And as you mentioned, nobody wants to really talk about moving on past Holiday, but that would be the biggest part of this movement. If we were to sit there and try to negotiate something, it's us giving up one key piece for a handful of pieces from Washington.
Yep.
Now I'll ask you this, since you've got the knowledge, which one of these guys that you mentioned to be packaged potentially with Smart has the better offensive upside to plug into the Celtics system?
Yeah, I would say Bub Carrington. He's a star. I mean, this kid, two of those dudes are rookies. One's a sophomore, and Bilal Coulibaly. Bilal's the best defender. He's probably one of the better defenders in the East as a whole. He's a young guy. He's active, French, gets it done. We know how those French guys are doing in the league right now. You know what I mean? Long, athletic, get it done. So on the defensive end, he's that guy. Okay. If we're talking about offensively, I think Bub is that type of package on the offensive end as far as prospect level. He can shoot the ball at an incredible level. He has the creativity to get it done, and he's also a guy who's not afraid to play off of other guys. He had to play off of Sarr. He had to play off of Kuzma when he was there. He had to play off of Jordan Poole the entire year. He had to play off of guys who saw themselves as scorers, who had bigger opportunities and bigger roles than him. So he would be used to coming into playing a secondary, tertiary role behind Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum in the future. So I would like to see him here if I could get one of them.
All right. A know your role, plug and play kind of guy. Look, for the direction that this roster is potentially heading in, that definitely sounds more appealing because like you said, it's not like we don't have superstars on this roster. We're just kind of in this weird void of when and who and the elements of what's going to be ready and when it's going to be ready and if we should be looking at a postseason coming up next year. Now, this is not the only name in the return to sender market. Another name bopping around is going to be Robert Williams. Yeah. I believe Robert Williams III, very eloquent and regal.
That is correct.
But could he level up this roster in such a regal form and fashion? What say you?
Yeah, this one I'm spoiling it a little bit, but I like this idea a little bit more. Now, neither of these dudes play games. Marcus Smart, Robert Williams, they both have been, out of the lineup every single night basically since they left Boston. Even a lot with Robert Williams when he was here in Boston. Time Lord would be a good return because I think finding elite level rim protectors and elite level rebounders is a finite skill in this NBA. Now, if he can stay healthy, his name has been floated around with a guy like KP and all this other stuff. Look, Yahoo Sports, we talked about them beforehand, that trade between, Portland and KP and Boston and Matisse Thybulle coming back from Portland, whatever. A lot of different names thrown out in that. If I'm going to give up KP and I'm going to get back something, it's okay that I'm going to get back Robert Williams because either way, KP didn't play here in Boston that much. Robert Williams probably wouldn't play that much. Fine. But at least we're getting a cheaper option, right? If I'm going to have a guy who's not going to play, at least I can have the younger guy, the cheaper option. Robert Williams doesn't have the offensive upside that Kristaps Porzingis has, but the Boston Celtics are quickly learning in this market that their identity is going to be a little different than what it was in 2024, and that is okay. So having an inside big who's just an inside big is something that the Boston Celtics might have to lean into the future.
That feels kind of grim, though, because tell me if I'm being dramatic. I always have to ask you guys this, but when I think about plugging in guys that have more defensive upside than offensive contributions, I'm having a little bit of PTSD as to me celebrating a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves and just being like, well, maybe because of their defense. Like, I don't want the Celtics to turn into this like defensively stout team, but they can't go toe-to-toe offensively.
Yeah, you're right. You know, and Anthony Edwards is a good player, and Jaden McDaniels had a great run and all this other stuff, and so is Naz Reid. He's a great player, you know, a lot like Peyton Pritchard, two guys who won Sixth Man of the Year back-to-back years, right? But the difference is Ant's not Tatum. And guess what? Okay. Whoever the second guy you think is on that Minnesota Timberwolves team, they definitely not JB. So, you know, and then your third guy is definitely not Derrick White. So when you got those three guys leading your offense, it's okay to have a fifth, sixth, seventh,
breathe a little
eighth
easier
option who can't put the ball on the rim as well as a KP. All right?
Okay. Like I said, tell me if I'm dramatic. Tell me if I'm dramatic. But we got a JT. We got a JB. Now we got to talk about the potential of them adding a KD to this roster.
Kevin Durant.
Right.
Okay.
Let's see if this can make sense. The Miami Heat are now the favorites to land Kevin Durant. Heat at plus 200. Rockets plus 250. Spurs 300. Timberwolves, as I just mentioned, plus 350. Raptors 12-1. Knicks, go on and so forth. So here's the factor here. Celtics
way down there.
All the way at the bottom of the list per NBA Central. The Dunk Central. Yeah. Does this make sense to you?
Man. You know, it doesn't make sense timeline-wise. But I'm not going to lie to you. If you have to ask me if I like this trade or I like the idea of Kevin Durant being here with a hopefully Derrick White.
I was like, somebody has to stay to make this
JB,
attractive.
And a hopefully JT. If there were somehow to get that done, that would be great. Now, realistically, money-wise, I understand. That wouldn't work. So it would have to be a Jaylen Brown that you would have to give up at least probably to get a Kevin Durant in return. Now, I would personally love to see Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant play together in 26-27. That would be my personal dream for the Boston Celtics. Okay. Other people might disagree. I think KD's got a long runway, and I know the Achilles injury with him, the Achilles injury with Tatum, leave a lot of question marks about their longevity after, you know, dealing with those injuries in that rehab. But KD and Jason Tatum, you're telling me you're going to give me two certified top 10, I would forget it, top 7 NBA players at the current moment together, and you're going to say we don't have a chance to win a championship here in Boston? I would tell you you're crazy. So I would love, I don't think there's a possibility, but I've been hearing about, you know, Trey with the Spurs. I've been hearing JB's name going to the Spurs. I've heard Kevin Durant's name going to the Spurs. I've been hearing some Bucks knowledge going in there. It's seeming like a multi-team deal could be possible, and I'm down for all of it.
Oh, so that would be how we sneak into the mix there, is kind of circulating all of the funds through some other organizations. I wouldn't be against it. Mm-hmm. My biggest question to all of this would be, I hate even saying this because when we say retool and you just want the team to say re-freaking build, but I'm going to play into the hand of it right now. Are we retooling? So are we still looking to win over the next 3 years? Or are we rebuilding to where it's like, hey, relax, we're going to build out the perfect roster because 5, 6, 7 years, we're coming back to being the most elite team in the NBA. Oh, and more importantly, we are going to finally get that back-to-back. Mm-hmm. We are going to be able to string together championships. We are going to get back to that dynasty conversation. So if that's the case, maybe. But if it's a rebuild, I'm not looking at KD. I don't need a bunch of shredded Achilles coming back and the question marks around that.
100%. I'm with you. I'm not looking forward to that either. I'll be quick here. Look, Kevin Durant plus Jason Tatum equals championship. But this is a retool, to answer your question. Okay. This is a retool. If you have the opportunity to do what the Warriors did, go back to when they won their championship in 2022, right? Mm-hmm. 2022. They took the opportunity when Steph Curry was out dealing with his injury, Klay went down dealing with his injury, and they said, okay, we're going to go get younger. They went and got Jonathan Kuminga, who helped them out throughout that playoff run. They went and got Moses Moody, who helped them out throughout that playoff run. They missed on James Wiseman, but they've used those young guys to kind of retool themselves into a championship window, even though they were also looked at as a team that could have been finished at the time. So, the second apron has some issues there, but I think this is a retool for the Boston Celtics.
All right. Well, bringing me up to speed on that is helpful. We'll see where my mind sways. But you know what? We got a quick break coming up here, and then on the other side, we have an expert to say what movements can contribute to this retool to keep this team in contention for a championship, because they're not dead in the water. There's so many of assets on this roster. So stick with us here on Hold My Banner and on the other side of this quick break.
All right, and look, you guys see it here with the 30th pick of the NBA draft. The Boston Celtics select Baylor Shireman. That was last year. But this year, we are back with some NBA draft in just about 8 days, okay? And in 8 days, we're going to have fireworks. At least that's what everyone's telling me.
Say, fingers crossed.
I'm excited for the NBA draft. You're back here with Ante Campbell and Casey Hudson. And we got a guest. We got the one and only Fran Fraschilla joining us to talk some NBA draft with us. Fran, oh, man, it's been such a long time since I've seen that great smile. How are you doing, buddy?
Storm.
Yeah.
I'm under a tree. You can tell I'm in a car, but I've just been watching some future lottery picks because the under-19 USA team that's going to go to Switzerland next week and play in the World Cup is here. And
yeah,
I don't know if you know a kid from Boston by the name of AJ DeBanza.
Yeah, friend of the program. We know a lot about that kid.
I know. I've been watching AJ the last couple days, and they've got a terrific team, probably 3 or 4 lottery picks on this team, and doing a little advanced work for you guys for next year.
We love to hear that. We love to hear that, Fran. Look, AJ's a great guy. I know him personally and all this other stuff. Great kid. I hope he's doing well, and I hope he's impressing you because I want to see him in a Boston Celtics jersey next year. But that's a conversation for a little bit later.
Actually, Ante, it's not a conversation because depending on what Brad Stevens does this year, and you know what I mean? The only way the Celtics are going to be in position to get AJ next year, a lot of it will depend on what, happens in the next couple of weeks, obviously, with trades, free agency, salary cap, second aprons, the whole deal. So you never know. I don't think AJ would mind at all coming back home. But that there's a lot of moving parts, right? A lot of moving parts.
Yes, 100% a lot of moving parts, and we'll definitely get to some of that stuff that the Celtics need to do this year. But I want to start off, and we got to talk about the number 1 pick, of course, Cooper Flagg.
Another guy. Yes.
We asked you about him, the kid out of Maine, New England connections as well here. What makes Cooper Flagg so special? I mean, everyone talks about, Jason Tatum and, how he does a lot of things that don't show up in the box score. And I feel like whenever I watch Cooper, there's a lot of that as well. So tell our fandom what makes him so special.
Well, it's a great question. I remember being in this gym here in Colorado Springs 3 years ago. He hadn't turned 16 yet, and I think he played on the under-17 World Championship team and made the all-tournament team as a 15-year-old. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing, Ante, is I can't pinpoint one thing he does great, but he does a lot of things very, very good, including, by the way, I think the last 2/3 of the season at Duke, he shot 44% from 3. Mm-hmm. That was kind of a little knock on him,
Right.
But first of all, he's competitive, as you guys know. And I know a lot of your viewers and listeners have seen him because he is a New England kid. But offensively, defensively, handling the ball the way he did. He's a great passer, rebounder, defender. He plays winning basketball. It's funny. I like comps. I like to say this guy is like, Con Knipple could be J.J. Redick or, Pat Connaughton or whatever.
Right.
They fit, right? It gives a viewer a chance to imagine what a guy might be like. When I think of Cooper, I see a little bit of vintage, old-school Tom Chambers, Andre Kirilenko, Kevin Garnett. There's a bunch of guys that I think that you could kind of throw in the mix, but I think mix is a good word because you put a lot of the great attributes of some of those guys, put them in a blender, and you kind of got Cooper Flagg.
Yeah.
And he plays. He's a winner, and he's gonna make the transition in Dallas a little bit more palatable after that bizarre trade in the middle of the season.
Bizarre is one way to put it. It's funny that you kind of already went there, Fran. Nice to meet you. I've heard so many great things about you. But that brings me to my question. How impactful can a guy like Cooper Flagg be out the gate starting off his NBA career? Because there's a number of teams that are like, hey, Mavericks got really lucky in this lottery conversation here. How could we make an appealing trade offer so that we can bring Cooper Flagg on to be a part of our team? And Boston's talked about it a lot.
Yeah. Let me tell you, after what Nico Harrison did in the winter, this kid, just put a handcuff on him. He ain't leaving Dallas. No, seriously. No offense to Nico Harrison. He's a friend. But Cooper's great for Dallas because they're on two tracks. They've got Anthony Davis hopefully healthy. Kyrie maybe can come back in January. We'll see. He was just at the NBA PA camp that I coached at last week. Looked great. But, Cooper can help those veteran superstars win in the next couple years, while he also is going to be a big part of the future of the Mavericks once those guys get long in the tooth and leave. So he's going to be in Dallas, I'd say, for the next 10 years, although we could have said that about Luka, last December.
Right.
But, but no, Cooper, I think, is going to be a generational talent. And it's interesting because I don't think he'll ever lead the NBA in scoring. And I don't know when he's going to be on an all-star team because of Kyrie and AD. But there's no question Cooper's going to be a really good NBA player. And we say future Hall of Famer. I can't go that far. But I'm a guy that said Luka Doncic was going to be, a couple-time NBA all-star. And I'm supposed to be Mr. International, and I didn't see generational talent. I saw maybe 3 or 4-time All-Star, so we'll see.
Yeah. All right. Look, Fred, I got to bring this tweet up and let you know because we got to talk about some Celtics stuff here, man. Look, the Celtics are, one of the teams that are looking to trade up, in the NBA draft. And they're talked about, looking at a point guard, all this other stuff. Look, they have the 28th pick. They have the 32nd pick. I need to know, what do you think the Boston Celtics should do with those picks in this year's draft?
Well, again, Ante, this is a Rubik's Cube here for Brad, and primarily because of the injury to Jason Tatum.
Right.
Okay? Because you guys have probably discussed 2nd April. First of all, let's put it on the table. New ownership.
Yeah.
So how is Mr. Chisholm going to react to whether they want to keep things going, knowing that you're going to be without JT for the year, or do you rebuild? Do you tear down a little bit? How much do you tear down? Who do you trade to move up in the draft? I trust Brad Stevens. He has made, since he left coaching and the sidelines to the front office, he's done a lot of positive things, obviously.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, we have to decide as the Celtics now, what do we do with, Porzingis, who looks like, I think his deal's expiring, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. 1 year deal left.
You got assets. I don't think they can trade JB. I just don't see they can see that unless they get a mother load back for him. The only way that you trade Jaylen Brown right now is if you're nervous about the second apron, and then you can get, a plethora of great assets.
Yeah.
Then maybe you think about it. You got Derrick White, who still has a lot of cachet around the league. Drew's contract is onerous. Let's face it, he's going to be 36 by the time JT comes back.
Right.
So there's a lot of moving parts here, and that's going to be the big decisions you make before you, hopefully before next week or after. I don't think you can move up a lot with 28 and 32.
Yep.
It's not like you're moving up to 6 because those picks are not valuable.
Right.
Unless you love somebody at 19 or 20 or 21.
Yeah.
And then you make the move on draft night, and then we can talk. But
a
lot of things going on with that roster.
Yeah. I mean, you brought it exactly to where I needed you to take it. I'm looking in the 19-20 range because I've been shouting the praises of Danny Wolf out of Michigan. I think that kid could be special here in Boston. I know I'm throwing you on the spot just a little bit, but what do you know about Danny Wolf? Do you think he could be a good fit here in Boston?
Of course. I was thinking about this and going through my mind, and this is a little bit maybe higher than 19. Let's say if they moved up to 19, for example. But, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 11th? Mm-hmm. Ty Halliburton, 11th. Kawhi Leonard, 15th.
Yep.
There's guys that are going to be in that range that are going to end up being really good players. Now, we know that one thing we know about the Celtics going into next year, no matter what Brad does, is they need young help up front. Mm-hmm. Because of Porzingis' injury history, contract situation. Al's already heading towards AARP, as valuable as he is. But they got to get younger, no matter who they keep next year. And a guy like Danny Wolf is good. I like him. I'll tell you who he reminds me of. And I know he was a popular guy in Boston a few years ago, and that's Kelly Olynyk.
Yeah.
And you go, well, wait a minute, we don't want Kelly Olynyk. Well, Kelly's been in the league for a decade now.
Right.
And a young Kelly Olynyk is a pretty good commodity.
Yeah.
And that's Danny Wolf. He's a young Kelly Olynyk. Now, if you want to go the other direction, maybe a guy that's a little better defensively who's got great size. Now you're looking at Thomas Sorber from Georgetown.
Yeah, I like him too.
Who is a well-built, physical kid, mobility, agility, a different kind of player than Danny Wolf, but the kind of guy that you might be able to get at 19 and all of a sudden a couple of years from now, like a Robert Williams was at the end of the first round. I know you were talking about Robert earlier. Yeah. And those are two guys that I think would be in the wheelhouse if they were to move up to, say, the late teens, early 20s. And that's capable of doing with 28 and 32 if you want to trade both to move up into the late teens.
Okay.
Interesting. Well, kind of combining what you and Ante are talking about here, say that they do want to kind of make some noise when it comes to the draft. What would you say if you threw on the GM hat and you were willing to depart? Who are you willing to move on from in order to package something to get a higher pick from any of these teams that you can negotiate with? What would make sense for the Celtics?
Well, I think when you talk about what makes sense is it gets back to who are the assets. The assets are Jaylen Brown, right? Not necessarily untouchable, right? Mm-hmm. Derrick White's a big-time asset, Mm-hmm. Those two guys, let's start with them. Drew Holiday still, although, another team's got to keep in mind that Drew's going to be 35 and play the season at 35. But he's still a tremendous asset for a playoff team. But you got to take on that contract. So to answer that question about who would you move on from, what are we getting back? Mm-hmm. If you tell me that Boston, it'd be ironic if Brooklyn got involved with the trade, right? Yeah. With all, to say take a Jaylen Brown. Brooklyn has got a mother load of picks.
Yeah.
If Brad wants to retool, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe a Cam Johnson gets thrown in there.
Right.
So again, not knowing how the contract situation works, who we're willing to depart with has a lot to do with who can we acquire to go younger, get the contract situation and the salary cap situation under control, and who can we bring back,
Yeah, it's so funny that you brought that up because, just thinking about the pieces and what they could get and what they couldn't get or whatever. I know San Antonio's name has been brought up, and I saw a tweet from you right before we got on there. You're saying Dylan Harper is already done deal going to San Antonio.
Yes.
I love him. I love Igor Dimon. Those are the kind of the point guards that I'm looking at. But in order to get up there, it would be some shakeups. Kevin Durant's impending trade is going to, be talked about all week.
Right.
What kind of movement do you think we could see the days before or during the NBA draft? Do you think this could be splashy with the star names moving around?
Well, I think it's going to be a splashy top of the draft because First of all, don't believe anything you read when it comes from sources inside a team, because everybody's lying the next 10 days. Yeah. They do it in the NFL. And so, for example, I've been told by some of my NBA friends who are actually here watching the young guys, it's done. Dylan Harper 2 to Spurs.
Yep.
That means that tells me that it might not be done. If you want to pry number 2 away from the Spurs, and you think they're going to take Dylan Harper, then you got to come up with some stuff to get that pick.
Yeah.
So, again, you don't know who's lying, but I do think teams like Utah, for example, the 3 teams that should have been the top 3.
Right.
Who do we got? Utah, Charlotte,
Hornets,
and the Wizards.
Yep.
They're all in play to move up. For example, Washington has got 6, and I think they definitely have another pick. In the late teens, I think.
Yeah.
That's a team that could move up to 3 or 4. So, to answer your guys' question about Celtics, if they move up and move those 2 picks, they're going to probably have to give up a really good player. And then what they get back is going to have to be a mother load as well. Yeah. You're not giving up Jaylen Brown.
Yeah.
Did he say he was in a storm?
Yeah, he did say he was in the storm. So hopefully we get back to, having Fran in a little bit here. But, Casey, what he was saying, it would take a mother load. And we're going to talk about a mother load of a trade that happened, getting back a lot of picks. It would be interesting, though, to see if Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Derrick White are enough for the Celtics to say, we're good. We're good. We're not going to get involved with any of these young guys. We don't need a Dylan Harper. We don't need a Igor Dimon. We don't even need a Danny Wolf out of Michigan. We're going to roll with our picks. We're going to roll with our guys and see what happens.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Almost every main guy on this roster, he referred to, if we're going to make any movement, it's going to have to be a motherload of assets, a motherload, which tells you the significance of the guys on this team. And one of the other things that we were getting ready to ask him, which would be, I love your opinion on, is who's probably some underdogs in this draft that can still be an asset to the Celtics without doing any, insane movement or making any kind of drastic asset shifts or changes or trade-offs.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, it sounds like we got Fran back, so we're gonna go.
Sorry about that, guys.
No. You're in the storm, so we're just glad to have you
you're
back.
Safe. Yeah. Exactly.
Look, here's the
safe.
thing.
Yep.
Here's the thing, Fred. Look, so we got it. Treasure trove of picks, all that other stuff. I did want to ask you about, kind of the Celtics sleepers, or not even just Celtics sleepers, NBA draft sleepers as a whole that you think, guys that aren't, being talked about by your casual fan that might be making some noise here come next season.
Well, that's a good one because, if they do have to pick 28 and 32, you're getting a sleeper.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, you're not getting a guy. Listen, if you're taking 28, that means 27 teams passed on a guy, right?
Yeah.
Now, we know just a couple years ago, some kid from Villanova went, 33rd? Brunson, I think his name is, right? Brunson, and then
Jaylen, I think.
Who went 30th?
Jaylen Brunson, right?
Jaylen, yeah, kid from Dad's from Springfield, Springfield, Mass.
Yeah.
This kid, Jimmy Butler, went 30th. I'm not sure whatever happened to him, but, he was pretty good.
Right.
But I'll give you some names that I like. I've got some under the radar guys that I wrote down here.
Yeah.
Rasheer Fleming from St. Joe's, 6'8", power forward, can guard multiple positions, a terrific cutter, ball mover, and he shot 38 or 39 from 3 this year. Yeah. If Sorber from Georgetown slips to 28, he's ideal. Drake Powell from North Carolina only averaged 7 points a game, but I love that kid. Defensive stopper, think he's a sleeper. Only a freshman. If you want a couple kids internationally, because I know you're going to ask me, guys, right?
You knew I was going to go to it. That was my next question. The international kids.
Yeah. This kid's moving up too fast now, but this is a guy that the Celtics could make a deal for at 19 or 20 in that range. Johan Beronji. How about that?
Got to say that
Johan
slow.
Beronji.
Say it a couple of times. Okay.
Yes, I practiced that one in the mirror, and he's a 6'10" kid from France who I think has got great potential, kind of a Clint Capella type.
Okay.
And then another guy that here's a guy that I really like at 28 or 32, from Europe, Noah Penda.
Okay.
And this kid, when I watch him play, he reminds me of a kid from Methuen, Mass, by the name of George Niang. Keep that name in mind, Noah Penda.
Yep.
6'8", can play the four. Yep, write it down, and you'll say, "Damn, Fran told me about that kid." On a couple of weeks ago. So keep that kid in mind. But there's going to be others. There's some guys that I think are going to be there in the late 20s that Brad and his staff have identified. They've got a great scouting staff. So I'm optimistic. I would say this: if you're a Celtic fan, trust in Brad Stevens, because since he's gone to the management side, he's done some really good stuff for the Celts. And again, if you're a fan, you guys know next year could be a rough year. Okay, you don't lose a generational talent like JT, and we just hope that with an Achilles injury. I think you guys have probably talked about this ad nauseum. I can't see any way with an Achilles that he comes back next season. So, and if he does, it's a miracle, but I don't think they'll do that. And so you're really looking at a year that could be a transition year. But depending on what deals they make and what they put together and who they might move, who's got potential to bring assets, I think 26, 27 is still going to be a very bright year. And then maybe if Peyton Pritchard comes and the way he played, maybe he has a near all-star type season. Maybe we see something out of the young guys like Shireman and the guys that they've been developing in Maine. The young man in Maine was the MVP this year.
Yeah.
Kid from Alabama, I think.
Yeah, Jordan. Yeah.
J.D. Davidson.
J.D. Davidson. Yep.
So again, I think you just got to stay optimistic if you're a Celtics fan.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%. All right. I'm going to ask you this on the way out quick. All right. If you had 30 seconds of advice, you're running the Celtics, you're the GM, you're in Brad Stevens' seat. What are you doing this offseason? All right. What are you doing?
Priorities.
It pains me to say this, but I think if you can move Drew and maybe even Derrick, who I know is a beloved figure, I know. I think you got to move one of them. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a playoff team out there that values either guy and can eat some of that contract. But keep in mind, that second apron now is no joke for every ownership in the league. And if they can move one of those guys, I think they probably will. I doubt we'll see Porzingis back unless it's on a favorable deal for the team. And then you just got to find some young guys to develop, free agency, draft, etc.
Yeah. All right. Well, Fran, we appreciate you from the car with the hail, holding up your phone camera. We appreciate you, man. That big smile always warms us, and we can't wait to have you back in the future on Hold My Banner.
Always a pleasure. Great to talk to you guys.
All right. When we come back, we'll talk some of that NBA Finals, and we got to talk about the big trade that happened over the weekend. Stay tuned.
Back at it with Hold My Banner, Casey Hudson alongside Ante Campbell. And I hope you did not just miss our fantastic guest giving us insight on the potential movement when it comes to the NBA draft, what would be worthwhile, what would probably not be worthwhile, but more importantly, what some of the priorities could potentially be as we get ready to see the next upcoming Celtics season. But with all that information, we heard All-Stars, we heard Sleepers. We got to get to some NBA Finals conversation because we have All-Stars, we have Sleepers, but we can only have one champion at the end of it all. OKC takes a 3-2 series lead, one win away from a potential title. What did you make of this previous game? We are obviously talking about that. 120-109 was the victory that OKC sealed in order to get this series lead.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to do too much, I'm just going
I tried to set you up so that you can have your party.
Halliburton. All right, is that what you said?
I didn't know you're going to take it that far.
What the Halliburton was that?
Whatever.
That's all I got to ask. It's so funny.
It's next man up. It should have been next man up. That's where I'm going to go with that.
It was next man up. TJ McConnell showed up. Siakam showed up. You know what I'm saying? Where was he? Where was he? They needed him. No field goals. This guy's supposed to be top 10. I got people calling in, yelling at me, telling I'm disrespectful. No, he's disrespectful to the whole entire state of Indiana because that performance that he put on was blasphemous. And then it goes back to game 4 too. Game 4, he was awful as well. We ain't gonna forget about it just because it didn't happen last night. Last night was an atrocious game for him. But honestly, respect. Hurt, injured, whatever. You're still a great player. I still respect you. I still fear you a little bit when it comes to you playing against this OKC Thunder team. Just a little bit. They've been dominating you except for game 3. Game 3 was your only good game. But the big thing that I need to talk about, because I don't want to spend too much time disrespecting Halliburton, this is about Jaylen Williams. This is about SGA. 40?
Yeah.
Jaylen Williams, 40?
Just disgusting.
Game 5? I mean, I'm going to be telling my kids about Jaylen Williams. Game 5. It changed the entire landscape of how OKC Thunder fans think about Jaylen Williams. He's a guy like Halliburton that has been inconsistent up and down, but offensively, he showed up when it mattered most. Unlike the Avatar, he did not vanish. He showed up for his team. Shout out to Jaylen Williams.
You know what? But this is why I'm like next man up, jokingly, because the next man up scenario for OKC completely overshadowed any effort of next man up for the Pacers. And that is what stressed me out. But you know what also kind of stressed me out?
What?
I can't get on you too much about the Halliburton non-disrespect, but I'm not the kind of woman to talk out of two sides of my face. When you're going to go into a press conference and say, this is what I need to do, you got to be realistic of the capability of doing so. And we all know that he's working through injuries. And look, that's what the finals are about. Everybody's banged up, everybody's injured, some more than others. But to come out on that press conference and say, it's on me, I know what I needed to do, I need to land these shots, I need to have these threes, I can bring my team into the fight, and you don't have the capability to do that. I mean, Siakam had 28 points? But then there's a small drop-off, and then the next man up, there's still a small drop-off. So that comparison is just where you see the eliteness of what OKC can do more consistently, because I'm not going to take away from what have made the Pacers so exciting. But if Halliburton's your tempo guy, if he's the one that pushes the pace, and you guys struggle to do that without him, we're looking at problems. And I hate to say it, I mean, I don't know why, but I've been cheering for the Pacers, so this just makes it hard for me.
So look, since we're there, all right, since we're there,
and
you're not going to be on the next episode of Hold My Banner right before Game 6. I have to ask you. I'm going to give my prediction later, but is this series over in 6, or what are we looking at?
Why do I feel like I'm having like hockey PTSD right now? Like, why is the NBA and the NHL just like sharing scripts right now? Look, we know that a good amount of OKC kind of falling apart, and some of the wins that they have been able to give over to the Pacers, hard-earned wins by the Pacers, they didn't come without uncharacteristic turnovers, certain sloppy plays. So when you can clean certain things up and you're already the more complete team, again, I'm almost talking mirrors here of hockey and basketball, you're the more complete team realistically, you check more boxes, they don't have to do too much. They can copy and paste this effort in this game. And SGA has been the kind of guy to stand on his business when he has to show up for his team. If he's responsible of 9 of 17 turnovers, that ball's not being turned over as much, not by him. And he has this demeanor to him where his leadership influences you without him going ham and having all these antics and drama behind it. So unfortunately, I kind of feel like it's OKC's to lose. That they can close this off next game and run away with the title. Yeah,
look, like I told you, I won't speak on Game 6 until next episode, but I will talk about when I knew Game 5 was over. I knew Game 5 was over in that first quarter when Rick Carlisle got the tech, exploding, yelling about that's a foul on that end, and you called this on that end, and all this other stuff after he just went into the press conference leading into Game 6 praising Scott Foster, of all people, of all referees. He's praising Scott Foster, saying how great of a job he's done and how mad he is at Indiana Pacers fans for getting on Scott Foster and blaming him for a game. And then guess what? Early in the Game 5, he's out there yelling at the refs. That's how I knew the OKC Thunder broke them. And yes, Shea, Chet, Jaylen Williams, Lou Dort, Caruso, all these dudes showed up and took over that game defensively, and then offensively they went on a run in the second half that was just magnifico. Magnifico.
I didn't think you were going to take it to Sir Ricky there and the antics, but we know that as much as I joke around about drama, I'm so far removed from any sort of drama. So when you start off with all those antics and stuff, that's kind of where you start to lose me. Yeah. But funny enough, like, respect your game, Annabelle and I were just talking about the fact of, like, opening up with this quote. If anybody could do it, would be pulling guys off the streets. So it's just kind of like, I think he just needs to really settle in and calm down so that, like, the team can just focus on the task ahead. But no, it wasn't over for me in the first quarter. It was more so over for me as the third quarter started dwindling down, because you saw some glimmers of life. You saw them kind of fight back. And what have we seen DNA-wise when it comes to the Pacers sometimes? Having that fourth quarter rally. So it just, 100%. Some of the things were setting up to be like, oh, we've seen this movie before, and no.
Game one.
Exactly.
Right. Repeated game one. All right, quick, before we move on to the next thing, I do need to ask you who your finals MVP would be right now today. Give me one from the Pacers and one from the Thunder, since the series isn't over.
Don't say it like that. I'll start with OKC. Hands down, SGA.
Okay.
It's just like, again, it's the humility as a leader. It's his ability to identify certain things. I think he inspires this team without doing too much, and he's one of those lead by example guys. It's just like, it's what you want in a leader. It's what you want in one of your most idealistic players, and so on and so forth. And realistically, if not for his points, if not for his rallies and his responses, we would be looking at a different series conversation here right now. So it's SGA hands down for me on that side. Although I know Alex has gotten so many flowers as well. But like, I just like, I don't want to be like that trendy girl on social media that's like, exactly. I'm not a hot taker. I won't do it. Right. Switching over to the Pacers side, I sing Halliburton all day long, but you have to take every game into consideration. And for me, the clutch gear, did we see it game one? Absolutely. 100%. Did we see it up until game three? Sure. But Siakam, he came in with those key necessary blocks to start that mental attack on a team such as OKC. He's playing the physical game and the mental game without doing too much talking, in my personal opinion. So honestly, not for a hot take, I think Siakam is up there in the MVP conversation.
Fair. I won't even waste your time. I completely agree with your takes. We can move on.
Wow. Me and Ante agreed on something. Well, let's see if this agreeable nature sticks with us on the other side, because you did mention we got another quick break coming up here, and then we're going to break down this big trade, how it potentially possibly impacts the Celtics and what it does to the NBA as a whole. So don't go anywhere. Continue to hang out with myself and Ante Campbell on the other side of this quick break here on Hold My Banner. Back at it with Hold My Banner. It's the last rally here on Hold My Banner, and we saved the most dramatic news for last, that being that big trade, that huge news that Ante alluded to way earlier. Now, bear with me because it is a lot.
It is.
The Orlando Magic receive Desmond Bane. What a sick last name to have.
Yeah,
congratulations to him on that.
Yeah.
The Grizzlies receive Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. You want to say like the third or the seventh on the end of that. Cole Anthony, and not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 5 draft picks. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, that's
because I feel like a crazy person over here. What inspires this kind of trade?
I don't even know, Casey. Look, here's the thing. When I was divulging this trade, I was actually with Travis Thomas when I saw this trade hit my phone. And, you know,
you two would be together. How poetic.
Right. My initial reaction was just, they must really believe in Desmond Bane. The Magic, they must really believe in Desmond Bane. And the Memphis Grizzlies have had success over the last couple of years. And I went to do the numbers because I'm a numbers guy. I had to check. When Desmond Bane is in the lineup, they have over 57% win percentage. Ja Morant, 58. When you do Triple J, their other third star, he's about 52%. Now, he had a couple of years without the other two guys, but when you're looking at Ja Morant's win percentage and Desmond Bane's win percentage, knowing that Ja Morant's missed a lot of times over the last couple of years, and it's been mostly Desmond Bane and Triple J, or Desmond Bane and a gaggle of other whatever guys on their team, and that's still similar, that shows you that the Orlando Magic see that he is the key to winning in Memphis. So they went and found their guy. Desmond Bane, elite shooter. He's an elite shooter, knockdown guy. He showed a lot of that playmaking ability, being a guy who was 5+ assists when Ja was out of the lineup, right? Mm-hmm. So he's shown that side. and he is a immediate defender that they're adding to their lineup. They're losing one in KCP. They're definitely losing one. But KCP didn't do that well. I know Boston fans hate this dude, and they're lucky that they're happy to get an opportunity to see him shipped off to Memphis and hopefully lose games someday. That's what they're hoping for, at least here in Boston. But KCP is a good defender, but not the offensive package that Desmond Bane, and neither is Cole Anthony. So when you have an opportunity, you have a window, and you say, okay, we were right there against the Boston Celtics, a team that is a championship pedigree team, and you see the teams like the Knicks having success once they beat the Boston Celtics. The Pacers were close to beating the Boston Celtics last year in the Eastern Conference Final. Will what they have done in the final? This is the move that they made for that. Was it a large haul? Too large of a haul? Probably.
Tedious list there, but no, you're right. Look, as somebody that covered the Orlando Magic for 7.5 seconds of my early career, I can speak to the fact that if they feel like they are getting close to success, they will make the necessary moves, and that could come at any length, and as we've seen here, a very tall length. But more importantly, you said it. They were very close. They were a playoff contention team. They've been close but no cigar too many times for their own well-being. And shout out to one of my really good friends who's actually their sideline reporter, Kendra Douglas. They were ready for more this year. They were ready to go deeper. They made the Boston Celtics uncomfortable in the postseason, even though we expected more out of the Celtics because they had the ability and the talent. Right. So all that to say that maybe Bane is all it takes for us to not keep talking about this team in an almost fashion, but realistically to say, okay, they're going to make people uncomfortable, but they're finally going to move past competition.
Yeah, quick. This means that those hauls, like we talked about with Fran for a JB or a Derrick White, are going to be probably enormous as well. The Grizzlies, I feel like, did win this trade, though. I mean, all of those picks for their future, this has to be helpful. If, a Paolo Banchero, if a Franz Wagner get hurt like they did last year, this could be a team that ends up in the lottery, and you now own those picks.
Right, and you're talking about a team that has stayed afloat during a number of injuries or key guys being out of the mix and still found ways to win sometimes. So we'll see if Bane can be all that name lives up to, figuratively.
And Batman when it comes to
the basketball. Well, that's a wrap for Tate Campbell and myself, Casey Hudson. Thank you for joining us here on Hold My Banner. Tuesdays, Thursdays, join us live at 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. And until next time,
deuces.